Morning, everyone. Good morning, or should I say good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're in the world. My name's Andrew Siegel. I'm a managing partner here at Joseph Mews, and I'm very pleased to be doing our first webinar session of the day today. This is our third episode. We're doing them every month towards the end of the month, and this one is all about renting. So a guide to renting your UK buy-to-let investment. We're being led by our audience here in terms of what you want to hear and what topics you want to discuss. All the previous month's webinars and more are on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and have a look at the other topics. We talk mortgages, locations in the UK, various interesting topics, we hope. So there's a bit of bedtime listening or bedtime reading for you, or something to do over the Easter weekend. We're going to have a couple of interactive slides, and we'll ask what you want to hear as well for next month's topic, so we can make that nice and relevant. And as I say, after the February webinar, the feedback was asking us to have more information on renting your buy-to-let property. We've got clients all over the world. We've got offices in the UK, Dubai, and South Africa. Today, it'll just be myself, Andrew Siegel. I'm on the left of the picture. Johnny is a managing partner and runs the Dubai office and covers that region. Mark is in South Africa, covers that region. I'll introduce you to Raj in a second. But the three of us will be around. Well, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And if you contact us, it'll be one of us or one of the team that'll contact you for further information or for some sort of consultation. I mentioned the sort of keynote speaker today is Raj Bedi. He's the principal at Martin & Co. And we've been working with Raj probably the best part of 10 years. And he's going to talk about the rental market in general and the Birmingham market in particular. If I could have the next slide, please. We're going to have some Q&A. So in the bottom of your screen there, you can see a Q&A. So please, we'll cover that at the end. So any questions about property, ideally, obviously, about lettings, rentals, anything around the topic, and anything comes up during the presentation today, and indeed any other questions that are property related, we're happy to cover that. I'm not going to steal Raj's thunder, but the property market is phenomenal. I'm older, and I've never known the property market to be so good in terms of supply and demand dynamics. But again, Raj will cover that in a lot of detail and more besides. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit about who we are. Some of you may or may not know us. A little bit of history. We were started by Andy Foote, who was our chairman, top right in the picture there. He started the business due to the fact that he had a bad experience himself investing in property. This was off plan. There was no communication, no transparency, no guidance, and it was all a bit of a disaster. And that was really because one of the reasons was he was sort of only dealing with the agent, not with the developer or promoter. And I'll come on to what differentiates us and why that's a good thing later. So didn't work very well in terms of the customer care and the support. So he decided to make it a lot better experience and set up property back in the day, really focused on the customer care and the customer side of things, which is really important. So he set up the company, and the track record speaks for itself. So having been a distribution partner for some big developers in the UK, we have now transitioned into Joseph Mews, where we're partnered with various developers and property companies. Touch upon that in a minute. Importantly, this allows us access to the best stock in the country, and in turn gives our investors the best opportunities. If I can have the next slide, please. We often get asked by clients the reason why we're called Joseph Mews. A couple of reasons. First of all, we're in a Mews house. Our Birmingham HQ is in a Mews building in Birmingham city centre. Another reason why we're called Joseph Mews is again based around Andy. As mentioned, he's been very successful in the property business. His biggest success, he'll tell you, will be his or the brain tumour charity. It's the largest brain tumour charity in the world. Incredible achievement. Andy started this from scratch. It's raised tens of millions of pounds and really made a huge difference to the life expectancy and the survival rate for people that have a brain tumor. We named the business after Joseph, who was Andy's son, who sadly passed away from a brain tumor. So the charity was made in his name and gives legacy to Andy, of course, his son, and all the other people involved. We support the charity as much as we can. So if anyone wants more information, you can find it online or contact us directly. And John has done some podcasts with some celebrities just to raise awareness and bring in more money to a very worthwhile charity. Next slide, please. So again, a little bit about performance. Delivered 3,500 units across 34 completed developments. A lot of repeat purchases, £500 million worth of delivery there. So a good track record. And I'll come on to sort of why that is and how we work with developers shortly. But there's a lot of history, a lot of performance and a lot of delivery there as well, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. So we partner with some of the best developers in the country. We work with them on an exclusive basis and vice versa. We know they have a great track record. We know we can rely on them, and more importantly, or just as importantly, they can rely on us in terms of what we do for sales and marketing, delivery, and I'll come on to the customer care bit in a moment, which I think is pretty crucial. You may not know a lot of these names, or you may not recognize them. They're big developers with super track records. You might recognize Knight Frank. They're one of the world's largest property companies and consultancies in the world. Been a massive privilege of ours to partner with Knight Frank's land team in the Midlands, in and around Birmingham. So what does that mean? It means Knight Frank are a consultancy. As I say, they are employed by a developer, so they'll help buy the land or they'll sell the land to the developer. They'll help with all the legal side of things, pricing, the whole lot. So they are the back end, if you like, behind the developer. And then because we've got such a good track record and we've worked with Knight Frank a long time, they'll give us the product to sell. So we get that sales, we get all the sales and the marketing on an exclusive basis. So with a company like Knight Frank, that is a massive feather in our camp. So it's great to work with these developers. Lots of due diligence is done. Knight Frank don't just work with anyone. And it's more to do with the customer care and the support and how we manage the relationship and the kind of ancillary services that we bring on that you may not think about when you're buying a property that can make or break a property and are sort of super important. All of this will give you comfort. You're dealing with the right people, especially when you're buying off plan. If you've not done it before, it's a leap of faith. You're buying from a brochure, floor plan, hole in the ground, potentially, depending on where it is in the construction process. So it's important to have the right partner with you. If I can have the next slide, please. I think this is why the developers work with us, because not all, most of the developers just want to get on and build and do the developing. But all the fluffy stuff is really important. The customer care, reservation, so getting a plot reserved, getting you to exchange, customer care, build updates, handover, mortgages, solicitors, furnishings, lettings. So there's a lot of strands to it, which we do very well. And we have our own customer care team, and you won't see that really. Well, you'll see it a bit on the reservation exchange, but when it comes to handover, snagging, delivery, that's really where we come into our own. And of course, you don't want an empty apartment. You want to get it let. It's got to be earning money. So that really is crucial, and that's where is one of our strongest suits. If I could have the next slide, please. So this is a development that it's the latest one, so I thought it may be relevant to show this. So we've just delivered phase 1, which is mid-January. Fantastic development in conjunction with Consortia, the developer here. Sold out ahead of completion, all sold out off plan, great location, great quality, great developer. If I could have the next slide, please. And again, when you're buying off plan, if you look at the brochure for Lockside Wharf, And then you look at the finished article, and these aren't the computer generated images. These are the real pictures after we've handed over. It's exactly what you see in the brochure. So there's no surprises, and that really is important. So we work with the architects and the planners to make sure what you're buying off plan is what's delivered. So again, really important to work with an experienced developer and a promoter partner like us. If I go to the next slide, please. With this particular development, it's quite nice because there's a little bit of, it's a new build, but part of the building is the original facade. So you've got the very large windows, you've got a nice lot of features inside, like the original brick walls in some cases. And I think partly because of that, because Consortia done a good job, we've won Best Architecture Award in the UK, in the West Midlands, and we're up for the developer is up for a global award as well. So again, we're very picky in terms of who we work with because we've got a fantastic track record of delivering those 3,500 units. Next slide, please. Thank you. I talk about the customer care. If you look at the slide on the top left, I've got Claire in the middle, just below the middle of the 51, apartment 51 there. So Claire is head of customer care. So what she does is really important. If you're ordering furniture, she will be there for the furniture to be delivered. They get rid of all the boxes. They make everything ready for lettings. They'll liaise with the letting agency for viewings and get everything set up there as well. So electricity, getting all the metering done, reading the meters, etc. There's quite a lot involved. It can be a nightmare if you have to do it yourself. Now, if you want to do it yourself because you live local or that's your thing, happy days. If not, we do all that. There's no additional charge for that. Obviously, you have to pay for the furniture, but for Claire to be there to do all the meet and greeting and make sure everything's arrived, not damaged, etc. So it really is a one-stop shop for you as the investor. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier, bottom left-hand corner, I think, on your Zoom screen there. Please, as we go along, put in some questions, and we'll come back to those. If I could have the next slide, please. So I'm going to hand you over to Raj for some slides, who's going to talk about the current UK rental market, and I'll be back at the end with the Q&As and a few more slides with you. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, so I'm Raj Bedi. I am the director of Martin & Co. We are a sales and letting agency based in Birmingham. So Martin & Co. is a franchise with 150 odd offices across the UK, and I have 2 offices in Birmingham, one in the city centre dealing with all the apartments, and then one in Harborne, which is 2 miles outside of the city centre, which is more dealing with family housing. Could I have the next slide, please? So we're going to go on to a poll question. So you'll have the opportunity to put in your answer. But what is your biggest concern about becoming a landlord in the UK? So it's finding reliable tenants, managing maintenance and repairs, or the legal regulations and paperwork. Okay, so we've got the answers in. So yeah, the biggest concern at 50% is finding reliable tenants, which is understandable. I can see why people are concerned about that, but as I'll go into more detail, you'll see that there's a lot of things that an agent can do to prevent that from happening, in terms of tenant referencing, credit checks, previous employment checks, landlord checks, etc. So hopefully by the end of this, some of your concerns may be alleviated. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this is some data from the Office of National Statistics, and it just shows you that the rental market and rental prices have been increasing over the years. You can see in the first chart, from about 2021, the curve goes a lot sharper. So that's ties in with kind of when all the lockdown restrictions ended, and from there the rental market just had a big boom. Rental prices just went through the roof, and increased at a rapid rate. But you'll see even, in some of the previous years, rents have still been, they've constantly been increasing. The chart to the right shows you the regional variations in rental price percentage growth. So you'll see that outside of London, West Midlands has performed the best in the previous 12 months up to October 2023. But you can see just nationally, all the regions have had good rental growth. Could I have the next slide, please? So this is just a few news articles that highlight the rental growth. The media has picked up on this a lot. There's been a lot said in the media about this, and this actually helps agents and landlords because tenants are aware, when it comes to you increasing the rent, that they're expecting it. They've read so much about it. They know other people where their rents have increased, so it makes things a lot easier when everyone's expecting it already. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so why are rents increasing at such a high rate? So there's several reasons for this. One of the reasons is increased costs for landlords. And if landlords are going to get increased costs, inevitably they're going to pass that on to the tenant in form of a higher rent. So one of these increased costs is higher mortgage rates. It's probably been about a year and a half, 2 years now, where the interest rates started to go quite high all of a sudden. Although, we are getting signs that they are going to start to fall in the near future, which is good news. But what happened is landlords passed on them higher mortgage rate costs in the form of a higher rent. You've also got higher letting agency fees. So in 2019, the government introduced a piece of legislation which meant agents and landlords can no longer charge tenants any admin fees. So previously, when a tenant was to rent a property, they would pay an administration and referencing fee. Typically, it might be around £300 on average. And them fees actually got banned. So what happened is agents essentially lost 20% of their income, so they put that increased costs onto landlords. Landlords then passed that in the form of higher rents, and actually landlords were probably better off by the end of it because maybe their management fee might be £10 higher per month, but their rent may be increased by £25-50 a month more. So it actually helped landlords. So yeah, the government thought they were helping tenants by saving the money, but actually it backfired. And then you've got selective licensing. So this is something that's introduced not in the whole of the UK. There are just certain areas and councils that have adopted this. It's quite common in many of the London boroughs. And this came into Birmingham. It was June of last year when this came in. And the cost is £700 to get a license. £700, and that lasts for 5 years. So although it sounds quite a lot of money, really, if you work it out over the month, I think I worked it out, and it was about £11 a month. So yes, an upfront cost to factor in, but yeah, not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Essentially, a license is basically just permission from the council to let your property. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so you've also got the supply and demand imbalance, and this is a big factor in the rents increasing. So There's not enough new properties. There's not enough building going on. There is building going on, but obviously it takes time. It takes time for developers to buy the land, get planning permission, build it out, and there's just not enough new properties being built in the UK and Birmingham. Also, tenants are staying longer. So with tenants staying longer, there's less available properties coming onto the market. Could I have the next slide, please? And then on the demand side, we've got more people wanting to rent. There's a lot of job relocations, especially in Birmingham. We have a lot of people relocating from London, typically. A lot of the big employers, they've relocated their offices to Birmingham, and from there you've got the staff relocations. Obviously, Birmingham's a great place for a big company to have their HQ because it's right in the centre of the UK. It's the UK's second city. And then also we have the higher mortgage rates. So that is putting off first-time buyers. Instead of them wanting to buy a house, they find that it's kind of a bit more unaffordable now. So it just makes renting more attractive. Also for job relocators, they're moving city, they don't want to commit to buying a house or an apartment. They want to get to know the area and rent first. You've also got an increasing population, and you've got a lot of migration into the UK from other countries. So we get a lot of international students, and we also get a lot of just people coming here for work from many other countries right across the globe. Birmingham is a very multicultural city, so you'll find people from absolutely everywhere. Could I have the next slide, please? So some current trends in the UK rental market. So what we find is, and this happens pretty much every year, is there is a lot higher demand between June and September. So in the summer months, that is the peak season, whereas the low season is the winter, November to February. It's not to say that you can't rent your property in November to February, you absolutely can. But it's just that the demand in the summer months is on another scale. But all year round, the rental market is good. Even December, we'll have tenants moving in a couple of days before Christmas. People still do move in the winter. It's just a bit quieter, that's all. To put things into perspective, in the summer months, we'll do around 100 properties that we'll let in the summer months, where in December, that might be 40, but it's still a good amount. We also have seen a large number of lets increase by videos and virtual tours since COVID. So prior to COVID, this just wasn't a thing. The thought of letting a property to someone without them even seeing it was just not on the cards as an option. But COVID obviously changed the world in how businesses operate, and it's quite common now. Obviously, if an potential tenant is in Birmingham, obviously they'll go and see it in person. But like I said, there's a lot of people relocating to the UK or from other parts of the UK in London, and often they will just view a video virtual tour, have a look at the floor plan and base their decision on that. Tenants' preferences have also changed. So there's more demand for higher standard of living, better apartments, bigger apartments, communal facilities, so your concierge, your gym, sauna, etc., co-working space areas, all these different types of facilities. A lot of developments have different types of things, but but yeah, there's a good demand for this. Tenant types. So the tenant type and target tenant that you'll be aiming for will depend on the property you have. So if you're buying a city centre apartment, typically you're looking at young professionals and international students. Now, some people, we find that some landlords are a bit adverse to accepting international students, but what we find that actually international students can be great tenants. They're often sponsored by their government, so they're paid a salary from their government to come and study in the UK, and they're paid tax-free as well. They often pay 12 months rent in advance. They offer higher rents than young professionals as well, because they've got the money behind them to try and outbid anyone else. And they tend to just want to get to the UK and put their head down and study, so they're not, out partying, etc. So that's the target demographic if you have a city centre apartment. If you have a house in a suburb, then you're looking more towards families, and couples, etc., and probably a bit of an older demographic as well. UK students, they tend to actually stay in student accommodation. You do get some UK students that don't want to stay in student accommodation because they want to get away from, that student life, and maybe the more mature students that just want to get their head down and study. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this is some legislation that has affected the buy-to-let market or could affect the buy-to-let market. So you may have heard about EPC ratings. So the government have been toying with the idea of changing the laws so that to rent your property, the EPC rating needs to be a minimum of a C. At the moment, it's a minimum of an E. There were plans to bring that out in the next couple of years, but that has been scrapped. The government have realised that it's not feasible, because there's so many properties, and I don't know the exact figure, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was 50% of properties with a rating below a C, and then you just literally, by putting that into place, you're wiping out half of the available rental stock. So yeah, good news, government have scrapped that. There may be some form of it in the future, but I think if it did come in, there'd be a lot of caveats for being able to apply for exemptions, to not have to get it up to a C. We've also got selective licensing that we've touched on. So yeah, there's not a great deal of benefit, if I'm being honest. It's a way for the councils to make money. But yeah, it's not a big impact. £700 for 5 years, it is a minimal effect when you work it out over the monthly payment. And then you've got mortgage interest rate relief. So this has come into effect already a few years ago. So previously, landlords could offset their interest rate, their interest payments, and basically pay less tax because of that. Now you can still do that, but only if it's if you've set up your property up in a limited company. So we are finding that a lot of landlords are going down that route now. There's a massive increase on landlords going from personal name into their limited company. So it's definitely worth something to explore. If you've got an accountant or tax advisor, speak to them about it. We find that a landlord that's maybe just buying one property, they will stay and just do it in their personal name. But if they're buying multiple, that's when they tend to go down the limited company route. We have something called the Renters Reform Bill that hasn't been introduced by the government yet, but there are proposals of it. Whether it does happen, we'll wait and see, and what that exactly entails is yet to be clarified. But there's a lot of detail to the Renters Reform Bill. One of the key changes that, if this does come into place, that a key thing that will happen is there will no longer be fixed term tenancies. So you won't have 6 to 12-month tenancies. They'll all be rolling tenancies, which would give tenants more flexibility. Again, maybe not a great thing for a landlord, but the rental market's so strong that these little things that the government are doing that are probably not great for a landlord, in the grand scheme of things, they don't really affect the market, because the tenants they need somewhere to live. There's big demand for rental. You've also got stamp duty changes. So we've had several changes in the past with stamp duty holidays, where the government have, done little tax breaks for, temporary tax breaks on stamp duty to try and encourage buy-to-let investment. There are talks potentially that there could be something coming in at some point with some positive to stimulate property purchasing, which would be a good sign for investors. And then again, we mentioned before, tenant fee ban that had an impact on the buy-to-let market, but that was back in 2019. So these are just a few things that have affected or could affect the buy-to-let market. Could I have the next slide, please? So we've got another poll question. So it would be good to see your answers for this one. So when it comes to tenant management, would you prefer a hands-on or a hands-off approach? So if you could select your answer, so you could either manage everything yourself, or you could use a letting agent for most aspects, or you might be open to both options. Okay, so then results have come in. So not surprisingly, as expected, most people would want a letting agent to manage the tenancy. There's a lot to a tenancy. Landlords have busy lives. You've got your own job to do. So yeah, no, that makes sense. Why a landlord would want to use a letting agent to handle everything. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so preparing your property for renting with a letting management service. So I'll just explain a bit about the service and what it entails, just so you can get an understanding. A lot of landlords think that they'll need to do quite a lot when it comes to managing the tenancy, but you'll see here that the agent literally does everything for you. So let's say you buy a new build apartment, the agent will do the key handover, snagging inspection, get the furniture pack installed for you, handle any certificates that need implementing. If you bought a new build, it will already come with these certificates. So your EPC, gas and electrical, city centre apartments, not many of them have gas, so that would probably be not applicable. If you're an overseas landlord, we would help you register with HMRC as a non-resident landlord. It's quite simple, just a quick form to fill out, and we would help the landlord with that. Then we market the property on all the main portals, so Rightmove, Zoopla, On the Market, etc. We also market the properties out to the big relocation agents, the HSBCs, the Deutsche Banks, the big corporate companies, to get the maximum exposure and best quality tenants. Then we find a tenant, we reference that tenant. So they'll go through landlord check with their previous landlord or agent, employment check, credit check. Then we will do a right to rent check on the tenant, making sure that they have got the right to live in the UK. We'll prepare the tenancy agreement. We'll then carry out the inventory, which will show you the condition of the property. And we'll, at the same time, we'll do any tests on the smoke alarms or carbon monoxide alarms to make sure that they're working. An optional extra you could have as a landlord is have rent guarantee insurance. So that basically means in the unlikely event that a tenant didn't pay the rent, I say unlikely because the arrears rate is very low, but it does happen, so some landlords like that bit of protection, knowing if the worst case scenario and the tenant doesn't pay, well, the insurance company will pay out and cover the landlord for the loss of rent. And then so we can help a landlord get that set up as well. Cost, it's not a lot. It can range from about £160 a year to £200 a year, depending on the rental amount. We then register the security deposit, which is the equivalent of 5 weeks rent. So when the tenant fee ban came in, part of that was deposits were capped at 5 weeks. You're no longer allowed to have a higher deposit than 5 weeks. We'll then do the utility transfer into the tenant's name, so gas, water, electric, and council tax. And then the landlord will receive monthly statements and the rent payments from us. So every month you'll get emailed a statement. It will show the rent minus any deductions for management fee, maybe your service charge bill. You might have passed that over to us and we might have deducted it and paid the service charge company for you. And that's where we can handle all your bills as well. So, contractor invoices, utility bills. And then we will handle any maintenance issues. So if you bought a new build property, fortunately, you should have maybe a 1 year or 2 year warranty with that. So any issues we'll deal with the developer. Obviously, there's no costs from the developer in fixing that because you've got the warranty. After the warranty ends, then we'd get quotes from you from local contractors. We also deal with any out of hours emergencies. So, the tenant gets locked out, at 1 a.m, you don't have to deal with that. We inspect the property, send you a report. So we do that after 3 months of the tenant moving in, and then every 6 months after. And then we do the right to rent recheck. So if the tenants from overseas and their visas ran out, we check the visa, making sure that it's been extended. We then do tenancy renewal and rent review. So look at increasing your rent, and also fixing the tenant in for a further 12 months, for example. If the tenant is given notice, then we would remarket for a new tenant, and that process would start around 2 months before the tenancy end date. Once the tenant's moved out, we'd produce a checkout report, and that would compare the inventory to see if there are any issues. Quite a common one is the cleaning. That's the most common deposit deduction for a tenant. And that report will determine whether there's cleaning needed. We'd arrange to clean, deduct from the deposit, and negotiate that with the tenant. And then we'd transfer all the utilities into the landlord's name. And then we should have a tenant lined up for you within a few days after that, and then we would transfer the utilities back into the tenant's name. You'd then get a bill for the void period, whether that be a week, and we could pay that from the rent on your behalf. Could I have the next slide, please? So we have discounted management fees for clients of Joseph Mews. So this chart here just shows you the fees that you'd pay. So obviously every agent charges different. Our fees with the discount are very, very competitive. And the initial fee for finding the tenant, setting up the tenancy, doing all the pre-tenancy paperwork is £400 plus VAT, and then which is £480 including VAT, and the tenant referencing is included within that. And then you've got the monthly management commission of 9% plus VAT, and then we have a one-off fee for registering the deposit, which is £20 plus VAT, and then you've got there for the cost for the inventory and checkout reports. The inventory and checkout, it's not actually done by us. We use a third-party inventory company. Reason being is it's non-biased, third party, the tenant can't argue with it, and it just holds a lot more weight when you're deducting from the deposit. And then you've got a tenancy renewal and rent review fee. So when after the 12 months, tenant renews a contract, that there's the £95 excluding that fee to pay. Could I have the next slide, please? So renting your property in Birmingham in 2024. So we'll go bit more specific into the Birmingham side of renting your property. So here are some questions which are like an FAQ that I'll answer some of these questions. So what are the average rental yields for a buy-to-let property in Birmingham city centre? So typically you're looking at around 6%. Obviously that can be higher or lower, but that I'd probably say that is probably the aim and the average that you'd be looking at. How much rent can I charge for my buy-to-let in Birmingham? Now, that is a vague question. It obviously depends on the type of property. But if I hone that into, say, a Birmingham city centre apartment, and it's a new build, I'd say typically a new build one bed could be around 1,100, maybe £1,200, and a two bed could be 1,400, £1,500. They often are higher, and sometimes they could be lower. It really does depend on the size of the apartment, parking, balcony, furnished. All of these different features of the apartment would determine the rent. What is the average void period from when renting my property in Birmingham? So I'd probably say right now we're probably in a slower period on the rental side, but that will pick up in the next few weeks as we go into the summer. But typically, I mean, even at the moment, while we're in a quieter period, our voids are still, a few days, a week, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. But in the summer, and I'll probably say from about May to October, maximum a week. Typically you need a few days anyway in between tenancies to, deal with any things that are needed, such as the cleaning, etc., or any little maintenance issues. But yeah, there aren't really void periods because there is such a strong demand. How much should I budget for maintenance on my buy-to-let property? So if you're buying a new build, then really for the first 2 years, there shouldn't be any maintenance costs because you're covered by the developer, depending on whether, they give you a 1 year warranty or a 2 year. After that, even so, you shouldn't, if you bought a new build and it's gone a couple of years old, you shouldn't have too many maintenance issues, but you will have a few. It's hard to say because occasionally you might have 1 year, you might have quite a big cost where the heating system needs to be replaced, but that is a rare cost to have. So then, yes, it might go, be £1,000 plus for that. But typically, I would probably say if you budgeted £500 a year, you could find that is more, that you're actually not spending that. You could go years without having to spend a penny, and then you might have a year where you've spent, £500 over the year, maybe more. But yeah, 500 is probably how I would work it out in any calculations that you do. What do you do if there's a dispute with a tenant? Obviously, it depends on what the dispute is, but ultimately, I'd say leave that to your agent. Get their advice. I think the way you'd want to handle a dispute with the tenant would depend on how the tenant has acted during the course of the tenancy. If they've been a difficult tenant, you might be less lenient with them than a tenant that you've, has been great and looked after the property and you've had no issues with prior. So yeah, I think ultimately get the agent's advice. Ultimately as well, though, the agent will be guided by you in terms of how you want to deal with a situation, but they will give you their opinion and probably best to follow the agent's advice. What insurance do you need for a buy-to-let property? So if you are buying a new build apartment, within your service charge, you'll have the buildings insurance already included. So you don't really, there's no mandatory insurance that you need unless if you're buying a house, then you'd need buildings insurance. An optional extra that you could have is contents insurance if you were furnishing the property. It's not massively expensive. The reason it's not massively expensive is because claim amounts are quite low and claims are very, very rare. The only time really you'd claim on the contents insurance is, fire, flood. So very rare things that would happen. So not a great deal of landlords take out contents insurance, but it is there if you want to take it out. The other thing is the rent guarantee insurance, which I mentioned before. It just gives a bit of landlord a bit of peace of mind, knowing if the worst case happens, the insurance would cover your rent if the tenant wasn't to pay. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so a few tips that I've got for a landlord to maximize your returns from your buy-to-let investment. So one of the things I would say is obviously it's not always possible, but in an ideal world, you try and renew your tenancies with a renewal date between June and September, so that if your tenant ever does leave, you have got that peak period where you will always get more rent in June to September, you'll get above the market rent because there is just so much competition during them months. So there's a common misconception by landlords that tenancies have to be either 6 or 12 months. That is not the case. You could have an 8-month tenancy, a 9-month tenancy, a 10-month tenancy. So maybe if your tenancy was starting in December or January, you might want to do maybe a 9-month tenancy so that it runs in line with September, and then from September onwards do a year tenancy every year from there. I'd also try and avoid 6-month tenancies if possible. If the tenant leaves, obviously you're going to have to pay reletting fees again, and really you just want continuity in your property and have a long-term tenant. So I wouldn't say don't accept 6-month tenancies, because the tenant might need a 6-month tenancy. They might be relocating to the area and just want to get a feel for the area first, but always push for a 12-month if possible. Also, consider pets. If you're not completely adverse to considering pets, then you know, it can be a good option, because tenants with pets will pay more rent. So typically you can, you know, on the advertised price, you'd get maybe £50, 75, maybe even £100 more for accepting a pet. Make quick decisions when you get an offer. So once your agent presents that offer, try not to hang around on it too long, because tenants come and go. The market moves very quickly, and what you don't want to do is you get an offer, and then by the time you've accepted that offer, the tenant's gone elsewhere because they haven't been willing to wait them couple of days while you need to make a decision. So yeah, try and make a decision within 24 hours if you're happy to accept that tenant. Get the right balance between the highest rent and a minimal void period. So there are a lot of landlords that they are really focused on getting the highest possible rent. Ultimately, you know, so if you've got the market rent, but you can always achieve more than the market rent, but you're going to then have a void period most likely. So you'll see I've done a calculation here where if you've got £1,000 rent over 12 months, you've earned 12,000 over the year. But if you're holding out for that bit extra, which might be over the market rent, so you're trying to get 1,100, but you then got a 2-month void period, well, you've then got 11,000 income. So you've actually lost out over the course of the year. You've also then got to pay for the council tax and utilities whilst the property is empty. So when you are speaking with your agent, always ask them, what is the highest rent that you think any tenant would ever pay? And what is the highest rent that you would achieve without having any void period? And that is the rent that you want to go for, the one where you'd get next to no void period. Get the price right the first time. So rather than trying at a higher price and then reducing a few weeks later, get the price right the first time, because the most interest you'll get on a property is the first few weeks when it goes live on the online portals, is when you get the most amount of traction. So what you don't want to do is allow the property to go a little bit stale on the market. Review the rent at each renewal. So whether your renewal period is 6 months, 12 months, or however long, always use that. And your agent should be using that as an opportunity to review the rent and aim to get an increase from the existing tenant. So I'd also furnish the property to a high standard and include soft furnishings. So go for that show home look. So, you know, the rug, the artwork, a few cushions, etc. This really only applies, I'd say, to city centre apartments. If you had a family house in the suburbs, then more than likely that's going to be an unfurnished market. But if you are buying in the city centre, then furnished definitely is the way to go. There's a lot more demand for furnished, and yeah, go for good quality furniture. Even if you want to go maybe a little bit cheaper on the actual furniture, but then go a bit more, use that money, them savings on the soft furnishings, then that is a good idea, because them soft furnishings really do help. Deal with maintenance issues promptly. So if you do have a maintenance issue, get back to your agent quickly, try and get it resolved. It will keep relationships with your tenant good, and they will more likely want to renew and stay in the property longer. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so I'm going to pass you back over to Andrew to discuss some investment opportunities that he's got in Birmingham.
Thanks for that, Ryan. Very informative. And just looking at the polls there, I think the first poll was a sort of reliable tenants. Obviously, that's important. And I think agents, particularly Raj, I know they do such a lot in terms of that screening and making sure we've got the right clients. Repairs and maintenance, legal and paperwork. Yeah, I think everything we're selling is brand new. So it's got a 10-year build warranty. You've got 2 years on the product. And again, I know Raj has mentioned things like heating. We don't electric heating. So they're built to a high standard, but to run low maintenance, if that makes sense, to keep your yields higher. And what we see, renting apartments for many years for clients, tens of years in Birmingham, the locations that we're developing in and the quality that we're delivering, we are getting the top end of the rents, which I think is obviously what it's all about. And again, we've got a strong furnishing team. We work with different third parties and going a little bit extra in terms of what you're delivering. You don't have to spend tens of thousands, but spending a bit more will get you quite a bit more of a return. You can make quite a big difference with the right kind of furnishing as well. So yes, and again, manage it. Yeah, the second poll, managing yourself. Yeah, no one really wants to do that. And I know sometimes, particularly if it's a new build, Raj might find the client, they might manage it themselves for the first couple of years and then hand it back. So there's all sorts of permutations there for getting there. You don't want to do any work, but you want the highest amount of returns as well. So again, speaking with someone like Raj will give you all that information as well. We've got some questions which we'll come on to a minute. I know Raj is looking at them. I think Raj has answered quite a few as we've gone through. But yeah, if I can have the next slide, please. Okay, so we've got 2 developments. One's called Settle. It's in the heart of Birmingham city centre. 1 beds are from sort of 245. You've got what everyone wants, really. The location is phenomenal. To the right of the building, further up there, you're in St Paul's Square, which is the address in Birmingham city centre. And it's like a village within the city centre. It's the bottom part of the jewellery quarter. To the left of the building, you're again 150 metres into the CBD, the Central Business District, all the train station, everything going on. So we've done, I don't know, 15 developments in Birmingham. This is probably the most centrally located. To the left of the building, you've got the BT Tower, for those of you who know Birmingham. So that will reference it to show you how central it is. And again, Raj mentioned about whistles and bells. They've got high ceilings, large floor-to-ceiling windows, some are dual aspect. And you might be able to tell they're on the 6th floor on that part of the building. You have shared gardens. So you've got rooftop gardens, which is fantastic. So you've got the outdoor space on the roof with brilliant views. You've got a co-working space in a lounge. So you or your tenant isn't working in the kitchen or the bedroom, so they can do, but you've got a lounge and computer stations on the ground floor. And then you've got a wellness area and little gym area as well. And again, you're in the city centre, so you can walk everywhere. Train stations, all the bars, shops, restaurants, HSBC, Deutsche Bank. BT is opposite, 4,000 staff there. So something we haven't touched on, but we have touched upon on previous webinars is Birmingham's the 2nd biggest city and 16 billion of regeneration. So that one's a perfect location. 20% deposit required. Average yield, we're estimating with work we've done with other stuff in the area, just over 6%. This will be ready. It's ready shortly, actually. And what we've done with the developer, it's a strong developer, 120 odd years old, Henry Boot. They've decided they've built the thing, it's nearly ready, and then released it. And they're only selling 4, there's 100 in total. So they're selling 40 now, or we're selling 40 now off plan. The rest will be sold on completion to homeowners at a higher price, and that has various benefits. So getting in earlier, you've got a choice. You're going to be saving money as well, because The capital appreciation in Birmingham is strong. Rent prices went up 0.7% in Jan, 0.9% in Feb. I've not looked at March yet, but we know prices never go, they're always going up, whatever happens in the world. So that's settled. Again, come back to us if you want more details on that one. If I could have the next slide, please. So yeah, this shows you, again, looking at the CGIs, the building looks exactly like that. And we've got a show apartment there. And if you go to the show apartment, or we send you videos, you'll see, I don't know if that's the actual show apartment or the CGIs, but we've got plenty of content we can share with you there. If I can have the next slide, please. So we've got a brand new commuter belt launch. If I can have the next slide, please. So this one is in Northworks. It's in Longbridge. It's a 20-minute drive from Birmingham, but it's like being in London. You're on the you're not in Mayfair. You're in another area of at the city centre. So we've got cheaper prices. We're starting from 187,500. 15% deposit required. Again, we're looking at average rental yields of 6%. And this one's just started, so construction's underway. Will be completed Q2 in 2025. Again, nice development, good sizes, good locations. Some have got balconies, car parking, etc. If I have the next slide, please. I think what's important about this one is, first of all, when I mentioned we partner with good developers, the developer is St Modwen. So they were a FTSE 250 company until they were bought for 1.4 billion by BlackRock, which is a New York-based investment company. So phenomenal track record. You'll have seen the signs now. If you don't, you will do now. They build all the big industrial units for your Amazons. They're massive on the commercial. And obviously on the residential side, built tens of thousands of houses. And in Longbridge, what we like, it's Birmingham commuter belt. The market's strong locally, as Raj will tell you. So I think we'll rent them to the local market. However, it's only a short train ride. The trains are every 12 minutes. The train station is 2 minutes away. And there's been a £7 million regeneration of the train station. And you've got everything on your doorstep. There is a new shopping mall, which is a 2-minute walk away as well. It's got the largest M&S in the Midlands. I mentioned that because, of course, M&S want to go for the areas where they know they're going to get the footfall. So I think that gives you an idea of what's happening in the area. The next, the trains are every 12 minutes into Birmingham, but the stations in between are you've got Bourneville, so you've got tens of thousands of people working at the Cadbury factory there. You've got the University of Birmingham, that's the next stop, with 8,000 staff. You've got the QE hospital with 20,000 staff. So you've got a fantastic local market, and you've got that Birmingham commuter belt market, and you've got a low price point. You've got the infrastructure, you're not far from the M5, you've got the trains, you've got the transportation. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. Again, CGI, so you can see what you're getting, what the look and feel of the apartments are like. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So we're going to have a Q&A session in a second. So thanks for your cues. I look after UK, Europe, and Hong Kong. Johnny's managing partner. He's based out in Dubai, so he looks after that region. And Mark covers him and his team for South Africa. So we'll have a little Q&A thing in a second, and then you can book a call with us, or we tend to get a lot of inquiries, or hopefully it'll be with us or one of the team. So we'll come back to you by region or who you're registered to on our system, and run through any questions or anything you may want to know. So that'll come up in a minute. If I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So questions and answers. So let's have a look here. So I've got Rajesh, 245k. Is that for a 1-bedroom? And is it furnished? Yes, that's a 1-bedroom. And no, it's not furnished. Again, click on the link and we can go through more bits and bobs with you. But 245, large 1-bed, that was in the settled development, not furnished. I've got a question here. I'll take this one here. Does the tax relief work for a limited liability partnership as well? We partner with a sort of tax specialist because it's regulated. So yeah, there are benefits with a limited liability partnership. And again, no obligation. We can put you in touch with our partner there that would go through all that with you and address your particular set of circumstances. And again, see if setting it up in an LLP or a limited company is going to work for you. So that would be good. So let's get Raj on board. I've got Raj. This is from Maxine. Should my apartment be furnished? What we're saying there, Raj?
Yes. So in Birmingham city centre, absolutely, there's a lot more demand for furnished. So it's not to say if you're dead against furnishing your apartment, it's not to say that it won't let. You'll just have less demand. Whereas the apartments that get the highest rent and have the minimal next to no void period are the ones that are furnished.
Cool. Okay, brilliant. And just something as well, I think that came up from Rajesh. What's an EPC rating?
Sorry, an EPC rating.
Yeah.
So that's the energy efficiency of the property.
Okay.
It's basically a certificate that every property that is sold has to have, and every property that is on the rental market has to have.
Brilliant. I've got something in from Rajesh. Can Johnny contact me on Thursday? Of course, we can do that, Rajesh. We'll make a note, and you can click on the next link as well, and that will automate that. We'll get Johnny to come in touch. I've got another one on the rent. What's the difference between we talk Longbridge and Birmingham city centre? Between that sort of commuter belt in terms of supply and demand and that Birmingham city centre in terms of type of tenant or supply and demand?
So yeah, but both areas, city centre and Longbridge, they have, the imbalance between supply and demand. There is, a lot of demand more than the supply of available property. So I mean, I'd probably say in terms of minimal void period and having it rented all year round and all of that side of it, that there's both your two developments, your one in the city centre and your Longbridge one are both on a par, really, to be honest. That they're both, it's the whole of Birmingham, and really, to be honest, the whole of the UK, you will not have a void period. It's just they don't really, or when I say won't have a void period, it will be minimal. I know a lot of landlords are scared about having, 2-month void periods, but as long as you're advertising the apartment for the market rent, it will let.
Yeah, I think we've done 3,500 apartments. What would you say? Half of those we've probably done in Birmingham. I don't know anyone that comes back to us or you or any agent and says we've got a void. It's just not a thing. I think, and again, check me on this if I'm wrong, but we got 50, I heard 50% less property for rent in Birmingham, and rents went up 14% last year. So again, if you look, we should be building in the UK 320,000 homes a year. We're not even making 200,000. If we built the number we should be building today, it's going to take 50 years before that supply and demand balance corrects itself. Would you agree with that, Raj?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I saw a statistic from Rightmove as well 2 days ago that basically they were saying that per property, if you compare this year to 2019, the level of tenant inquiries they're getting per property has doubled as well. So it just kind of gives you a perspective. I mean, 2019 was busy for the rental market. So it just gives you a perspective of how busy it is now. The fact that it's doubled.
Yeah, I think that supply and demand dynamic is just crazy, really. There's just not enough houses, And then of course we've got capital appreciation. We're still seeing prices are increasing. So yeah, I think it's the perfect storm, really. in terms of being a sort of buy-to-let landlord. And going back, we mentioned Lockside Wharf. We delivered phase 1. It's only 16 apartments in middle of January. That first phase tipping down with rain, and we've rented everything out in a short period of time. And again, when we work with Raj, we'll get into developments earlier to take photos. I think you were saying in COVID, you were renting things out and people were just doing everything online, and that's probably still the case. Because it goes quite quickly, people will take a video of it.
Absolutely. A lot of people, sometimes even that they'll be local to Birmingham, they'll still want to take it based on the video because maybe they can't view it. They're not free for 3 or 4 days, and they're worried someone else is going to take it. So they say, look, can I pay my holding deposit now before someone else takes it? So yeah, it is quite common now.
Perfect. I've got someone wants the slide deck. Yeah, we can send that over. That's brilliant. And I've got an anonymous attendee. Can I invest in an apartment for self-use for a period of time, maybe 1 to 2 years, and then rent it out? Is there a difference in stamp duty? So I suppose when you're buying an apartment for your own use, then you can get maybe a 5 or 10% mortgage. It's a buy-to-let mortgage, it's 25%. So there's that to look at. When I started in property, I bought something which was for my own use, and I moved on, kept that one and let it out. So yes, there will be a difference in stamp duty if you're buying for you to live in, or if you're buying for a second home as an investment. So it depends really. Again, everyone's circumstances are different. If you've already got a home, then it's going to be a second home, so you're going to pay full stamp duty. If it's your first home and it's for you to live in, depending on the prices and the threshold, going to be less stamp duty. Would you agree with that, Raj?
Yeah. So obviously depends on your situation and whether you've already owned another property or not. But yeah, essentially, if you were a first-time buyer, buying
and living
the property to live, pay the lower stamp duty.
Brilliant. Cool. Thanks for that. I think that's all of the questions there. Yeah, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Let me just clear my screen. So yeah, a couple of poll questions. Would you like to book a free consultation, again, with one of the team? And just click the box if it's talk about renting, current investments, the current UK property market, or other. We're happy to talk. If you're not buying now, it's not a problem. If you just want to understand anything in more detail, we're happy to do that. And then if you could fill in number 2 as well, to serve you better, what topics would you like us to cover in the future webinar? We'll be having one. It's not set up yet, but we'll invite everyone for one at the end of April. And that is, do you want to talk about locations, investing from overseas, developing a portfolio, or tax optimization? You can just click on that. We'll get back to you there. See what we get there. And I think that's probably it. Is it? If I could have the next slide. Is there another slide there, Sanjana?
No, Andrew, that's it.
That's it.
Just
cool. That's awesome. Yeah. I could talk all day. I won't. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Again, fill in the details, come back to us, and then we're happy to come back to you. If you want to talk in detail with Raj or one of his team about lettings, anything in general, let us know. Thanks once again for joining. Hope to see you soon, and hope to see you on the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.